It began like every other night. A silent sky, a routine scan, and a data point that should have meant nothing. But sometimes the universe hides its biggest secrets in the smallest flickers. On April 16th, a faint blur appeared across a telescope feed in Hawaii, moving faster than anything that should have been there. At first, astronomers thought it was noise, just another cosmic rock passing by. But as they tracked it frame by frame, that tiny blur began to defy every expectation. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't an asteroid. And it wasn't following the rules. They named it 3I Atlas, the third known interstellar object to enter our solar system. A traveler from another star, cold, silent, and impossibly alone. But even in its silence, something felt different. At first glance, its path was perfect, predictable, smooth, the kind of arc every celestial body follows under gravity's control. But when they mapped it over time, the numbers refused to line up. It shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if something invisible was nudging it, guiding it. The scientists recalibrated their data. They checked for software errors, atmospheric distortion, gravitational anomalies. Nothing explained it. Imagine watching a leaf drift in a river, then realizing the current is bending around it. That's what 3I Atlas was doing, bending reality's current. Weeks passed, and observatories around the world turned their gaze toward the object, from Chile to Japan, from NASA's infrared array to amateur astronomers in their backyards. Everyone wanted a glimpse, and yet, the more they watched, the less they understood. Its rotation was uneven, like a slow heartbeat. Its surface shimmered in ways no comet ever should, sometimes too bright, sometimes too dark. As if reflecting light, it was creating itself. The deeper the data went, the stranger the story became. Astronomers have seen many travelers before, Oumuamua, Borisov, strange visitors that came and went like cosmic ghosts. But 3I Atlas didn't just drift through space. It performed. Every few days, it would tilt slightly, its path bending by fractions of a degree. Tiny, deliberate movements that no known physical process could explain. One astrophysicist described it like this: "It's as if something wants to stay on course, not by chance, by choice." That single sentence changed everything, because choice implies awareness. Soon the online forums lit up. Was this a probe? An alien machine drifting between stars? Or just an illusion of our overreaching imagination? A pattern made by minds desperate to find meaning? But even skeptics grew quiet when new data came in. The trajectory curve wasn't just strange, it was intentional. Mathematically precise adjustments, spaced days apart, subtle enough to avoid detection, but real enough to alter its course. Somewhere between science and something else, 3I Atlas was moving on its own. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the senior analysts stayed behind after hours. He stared at the simulation, the glowing trace of the object, looping through our solar system. He rewound it, forward again, then froze it at a single frame. The line bent, ever so slightly, toward the sun. But here's the thing, that shouldn't have happened. Every interstellar object enters and exits our system on a hyperbolic path. It passes through, then leaves forever. Gravity alone can't make it curve inward, unless something else was controlling its velocity. He leaned closer to the screen. For a moment, he felt something that scientists rarely admit. Not curiosity, not excitement, but fear. because for the first time it looked less like a rock and more like a decision. Over the next few days, observatories began sharing encrypted logs. There were whispers of electromagnetic fluctuations, faint, rhythmic pulses that appeared whenever 3I Atlas entered view, almost like a heartbeat buried in static. Each time they pointed their instruments toward it, the pulse grew slightly stronger, and each time they looked away, it faded. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidence doesn't usually keep time. The readings became impossible to ignore. It was as if the object was reacting to observation, aware that eyes were on it. Still, no one dared say it aloud. To suggest that a comet might be responding was scientific heresy. So they kept quiet, published neutral papers, used safe words like anomaly, perturbation, and unknown origin. But behind closed doors, the fear was spreading, because space has rules. Old, cold, predictable rules. And this thing wasn't following any of them. By the time it neared Mars's orbit, 3I Atlas had slowed down. Slightly, but noticeably. Not enough to stop, just enough to feel deliberate. Every new reading pulled the same haunting question closer. What force was shaping its path? A gravitational pull from an unseen planet? A solar wind interaction? Or something artificial controlling its motion from within? The word machine appeared in one classified email. Then it appeared in 5 more. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. Some scientists refused to believe it. Others couldn't stop believing. A few dared to wonder, what if 3I Atlas wasn't just passing through? What if it was studying us? A silent witness from another civilization, observing how we react to its presence. After all, we point our telescopes at the stars every night. Maybe tonight the stars were looking back. When the data feed from Atlas Observatory refreshed that final night, something unexpected happened. The object's reflectivity spiked, a sudden flare of brightness that lasted just 3 seconds, then darkness. Every telescope saw it. Every radar system lost it. Gone. The coordinates were empty, as if the sky itself had blinked, and in that silence, that perfect, infinite silence, a new question began to form. If 3I Atlas wasn't a comet, if it wasn't a rock or a machine or anything we've ever known, then what was it? Maybe it wasn't something traveling through space. Maybe it was space, folding, observing, communicating in a language we haven't learned to hear. Because sometimes what looks like movement is actually message, and what looks like a traveler might be a teacher. The night it vanished, one astronomer wrote a single line in his private notes. It left the same way it arrived, silently. But I can't shake the feeling that it saw us first. And somewhere, in the black between stars, the silent visitor drifts on, unseen, unmeasured, and unanswered. What force was guiding it? What truth was it hiding? That is where the story truly begins. At first, it looked like nothing, just another stream of numbers on a monitor. Brightness values, light intensity. The kind of data astronomers see every day and forget by morning. But this time, something felt off. 3I Atlas wasn't shining like a normal object. Its light wasn't random or steady. It pulsed, faint, then bright, then faint again, over and over, with a rhythm that refused to be ignored. In astronomy, every celestial object, whether it's a comet, an asteroid, or a planet, reflects sunlight in a way we can measure. We call it a light curve. And for centuries, Those curves have been predictable. Smooth, natural, dictated by rotation and distance from the sun. But the light curve of 3I Atlas broke every pattern we knew. The data looked almost too clean. The pulses came in perfect intervals, every 11 minutes on the dot. Not a second off. It wasn't noise. It wasn't a glitch. It was a pattern, and patterns mean intention. The first astronomers to notice thought it must be a calibration error, maybe a telescope malfunction, maybe sunlight bouncing through an ice cluster. But then, halfway across the world, another observatory in Chile recorded the same exact sequence. 11-minute pulses, perfectly synchronized. Then Japan, then Spain, then the Hubble Space Telescope. Different instruments, different time zones, same rhythm. And that's when the silence broke. Inside research labs, scientists gathered around glowing monitors, staring at the same repeating wave. A heartbeat of light, echoing across space. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Could this be a signal? Because light doesn't think. Rocks don't pulse in perfect intervals, and physics doesn't compose music. Yet here it was, a cosmic metronome ticking through the void. They tried everything to explain it. Maybe it was rotation, but the timing was too consistent. Maybe it was thermal cycling, but the energy spikes were too clean. Maybe it was interference from our own satellites, but the frequency came from deep space, far beyond any human technology. Every explanation fell apart. Each dataset only made the mystery deeper. One scientist wrote in her notes, "It's as if the object knows it's being watched." Another compared it to a lighthouse sweeping across the galaxy, one steady beam turning through the dark. But this wasn't a beam. It wasn't scattered sunlight. It was a pulse, a deliberate flicker, like a code written in brightness itself. In the control room of the Atlas Observatory, a technician ran a simple test. He plotted the time between each pulse and converted it into binary. Light as 1, darkness as 0. The result was structured, repeating, not random. At first, he thought it was coincidence, but when he graphed the entire 72-hour cycle, something emerged. A sequence that resembled prime numbers, numbers that only divide by themselves and 1. The mathematical foundation of order. It was as if the universe had whispered a single word: intelligent. The discovery spread quietly at first, shared between observatories, passed through encrypted channels. But by the time the European Space Agency confirmed the pattern, the internet had already caught fire. Was it alien? Was it artificial? Was this the first time in history that something out there had spoken to us, not in words, but in light? Theories spread faster than truth could keep up. Some said it was a dying machine sending its final signal before disintegration. Others claimed it was a message, a cosmic ping, waiting for an answer. And a few believed it was something deeper. A test, a way for the unknown to see if anyone out here was paying attention. But here's where it gets stranger. During one observation window, the pulse suddenly changed. Not by much, just a fraction of a second delay. Insignificant on paper, but impossible in practice. Every model predicted it should have stayed exact. And yet, that shift, tiny, almost imperceptible, aligned perfectly with a moment when Earth's largest radio array turned to listen. It was as if the object had noticed, as if it was listening back. That night, an astronomer at JPL typed a single line in the team log. It knows. No one dared to expand on it. No one wanted to sound insane. But everyone felt the same unease, the sense that somewhere in the black between stars, something had recognized us. For weeks, the pulse continued, always the same pattern, the same rhythm, a light curve unlike any in recorded history. But when researchers attempted to replicate the readings using different wavelengths, ultraviolet, infrared, radio, something happened. The signal stopped. Not gradually, instantly, every telescope that was looking went dark. The pulse vanished. The heartbeat ceased. And for 3 long days, there was only silence. Then, just as mysteriously as it had stopped, it began again. But the rhythm was different this time. Shorter bursts, faster intervals. Like it had adapted. Like it had changed its language. The same binary conversion now produced new numbers, not primes, but sequences that formed geometric ratios, shapes, angles, blueprints. It was as if light itself was trying to draw. By now the world was watching. Even the most skeptical voices had gone quiet. Because if this was random, it was the most deliberate randomness ever recorded. And yet, no one could decode it. Every pattern led to another. Every answer created a deeper question. One mathematician described it as an infinite sentence, written in light, waiting for us to learn the alphabet. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it wasn't meant to be understood, only noticed. Late one night, as the data streamed across the monitors, a junior researcher whispered something that stuck with everyone who heard it. What if it's not trying to talk to us? What if it's trying to wake something up? The room went silent. Because deep down, no one could shake the feeling that the message wasn't meant for us. It was meant for something else, something listening from somewhere we still can't see. And as 3 Atlas continued its slow drift through the solar system, its rhythm echoed like a metronome marking time, counting down to something. No one knew what. No one dared to say. But the data doesn't lie, and what it showed was simple. This wasn't nature. This was design. The question now wasn't if it was artificial. The question was, why was it here? Because in the dark silence of the universe, every pulse means something. And sometimes, light isn't just light. Sometimes it's a message. And 3I Atlas had just sent the first one. There's something unsettling about repetition. When the same pattern appears again and again, across space, across time, it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like intention. And that's what was happening now. Across every continent, observatories were seeing it. The same perfect pulse. Every 11 minutes, a rise and fall of light. Like a slow heartbeat in the dark. At first, most astronomers brushed it off. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe solar interference. Or a quirk in the instruments that synced them all to the same faulty clock. But then the data lined up, down to the millisecond. No matter where you were on Earth, Hawaii, Chile, Japan, or Cape Town, the same pulse arrived at the exact same moment. That's not how the universe works. Light doesn't coordinate itself like that, unless something, or someone, wants it to. Inside NASA's Deep Space Network, the data feeds looked like a living rhythm, a steady hum of light frequencies rising and falling in waves. At first, it was just a faint blip on the chart, but then they noticed something eerie. The brightness wasn't random. It followed an equation, the same logarithmic curve used in sound engineering. like the echo of a voice just beyond hearing range. They called it the pulse in the dark. The pulse wasn't just seen in light, it began to show up in thermal data too. Temperature fluctuations that matched the rhythm of the luminosity shifts. Imagine an object in the freezing vacuum of space, heating and cooling every 11 minutes. That shouldn't happen. Nothing out there does that naturally. To some, it meant simple physics, maybe an internal reaction, or some rare energy release. But to others, it looked like control. Like 3I Atlas was breathing. Soon the pulse became the most studied anomaly in modern astronomy. And yet, the more they looked, the stranger it got. Because the light wasn't reaching us the way it should, when they tracked it through space, they discovered something that broke every model. The pulse didn't spread outward like a wave. It traveled straight, focused, directional, as if it was aimed. In one quiet room at the European Southern Observatory, a small team ran the pulse through frequency filters, searching for meaning hidden in the flickers. They slowed it down, sped it up, converted it into audio. And what they heard stopped them cold. A faint hum. Rhythmic, almost melodic, a series of tones spaced exactly 11 minutes apart. It wasn't random noise. It was structured, like a musical scale from another world. Some said it sounded like a message. Others said it was the signature of machinery. Either way, it was something no comet should ever do. When the recordings leaked online, the internet exploded. Forums filled with theories. Is it alive? Is it artificial? Is it trying to say something? But the most haunting question wasn't what it was saying. It was who it was saying it to. Because when scientists compared the timing of the pulse to our own transmissions, radio, radar, even old satellite signals, something impossible emerged. The pulse wasn't random at all. It was mirroring us. Every time Earth sent a large electromagnetic burst into space, whether from radar, communications, or observatories scanning, 3I Atlas responded 11 minutes later with light, like a reply. One scientist speaking off record said it best. It's not talking to us, it's answering. The world didn't know how to react. Some were thrilled. The first proof of intelligent contact. Others were terrified, because if it was answering, that meant it was listening. And if it was listening, that meant it was aware. Governments began restricting access to the data. Public feeds went dark. Only classified research networks still received the raw signals. But leaks still got out. And they all said the same thing. The pulse was getting stronger. Every week, its brightness increased slightly, like it was growing more confident. Or like it was getting closer. By the end of that month, one anomaly became clear. The pulse wasn't just light. It carried a faint polarization shift, meaning the photons themselves were twisted, encoded with directional spin. That's not something nature does easily. That's something you engineer. When decoded, the twist patterns formed geometric alignments, triangles, spirals, symmetrical arcs. Not symbols we understood, but shapes too precise to be chance. It wasn't just communication anymore. It was design. And yet, amidst all the fascination, one thing kept everyone uneasy. The pulse wasn't directed at us. Every time the data was plotted, the origin didn't point toward Earth. It pointed slightly beyond us, somewhere past the solar system, somewhere deep in the void between stars. It was as if 3I Atlas wasn't talking to us. It was talking through us. And we were just in the way. In one of the final transmissions before public access was cut, a strange pattern appeared. The usual 1-1, minute cycle broke for the first time, replaced by a new rhythm. Shorter bursts, faster intervals, forming a sequence of repeating 3. To anyone else, it meant nothing, but to the few who had followed it from the start, it felt like the next stage. Something was changing. The pulse wasn't a signal anymore. It was an awakening. The last public recording showed the light curve flattening. A long, sustained brightness that refused to fade. For hours, 3I Atlas glowed steadily, brighter than it ever had before. Then nothing. Complete silence. The pulse was gone. But the data didn't end there. Hidden in the final transmission was a faint afterglow, a soft residual frequency, almost buried in the noise. When analyzed, it formed a repeating pattern, identical to the first signal we ever sent into space decades ago. The Arecibo message. Our own greeting to the stars echoed back to us. And that's when people stopped calling it coincidence. Because maybe this wasn't about finding something out there. Maybe something out there had found us. And now it was waiting. For what? No one knew. For whom? No one wanted to ask. But somewhere in the darkness, beyond the static, beyond the silence, a pulse still beats, still waiting for its answer. Because sometimes the universe doesn't shout, it whispers. And 3I Atlas was whispering back. Space is cold, unforgivingly cold. In the deep silence between worlds, heat doesn't linger. It vanishes. That's why what happened next made no sense at all. When astronomers turned their infrared telescopes toward 3I Atlas, they expected to find what they always do: a frozen traveler drifting through the black. No warmth, no activity. Just silence wrapped in ice. But what they found instead changed everything. The first readings came from Chile. A faint rise in temperature, small but steady. At first, they dismissed it. Maybe an error, maybe sunlight bouncing off an angle they didn't account for. But then, hours later, the same readings appeared in Hawaii. And then again in Spain. Same numbers, same pulse. The temperature of 3I Atlas was climbing. Not gradually, but rhythmically. Every 11 minutes, the same interval as the light pulses. Its surface heated up, then cooled down again. Like something alive, breathing in the dark. Infrared imagery doesn't lie. It doesn't care about illusion or imagination. It only measures energy. And what it revealed was a surface too organized to be natural. Tiny heat blooms spreading in symmetrical waves, rising, then fading in perfect synchronization. That shouldn't happen. Not on a rock drifting through interstellar cold. Not without something controlling it. One scientist described it best. It's not radiating heat. It's regulating it. That word, regulating, sent a chill through every observatory that heard it, because the only things that regulate temperature are systems, machines, organisms, or something designed to survive. Soon, the data feeds became impossible to ignore. Every 11 minutes, 3I Atlas released a controlled burst of infrared radiation, short, precise, measurable. Not chaotic like a volcanic flare or thermal vent. Not random like sunlight scattering off dust, but deliberate. As if it was managing energy from within. Was it cooling itself down? Or was it waking up? The next breakthrough came from the Spitzer Space Telescope. Before it was decommissioned, Its deep infrared sensors picked up a pattern within the heat bursts, a consistent temperature curve that repeated exactly every cycle. It wasn't a smooth wave. It had edges, steps, like the rise and fall of a digital signal. To the human eye, it was just heat. But to anyone looking closer, it was data. By now, teams around the world were working around the clock. Theories collided. Was 3I Atlas a comet with an exotic core? A dormant probe designed to mimic rock? Or something entirely beyond our understanding? Every answer only created more questions, because the more they studied it, the more it acted like something that knew it was being studied. In one experiment, researchers decided to test the theory of reaction. They projected controlled laser pulses toward 3I Atlas, harmless routine optical scans, and within one cycle, the object's heat signature changed, not dramatically, just a fraction of a degree higher. But it was enough. It wasn't coincidence. It was response. One researcher described it in a single sentence that none of them could shake. It looked back. That night, every observatory that had eyes on the object went silent, not out of awe, but out of fear. Because if 3I Atlas was responding to us, that meant it was aware of us. And if it was aware, that meant we had already been seen. The strange part was how calm it all seemed. The heat never spiked dangerously, never erupted or radiated uncontrollably. It stayed steady, like something perfectly balanced. Every rise had a fall, every surge had a rest, almost as if it was maintaining itself, holding its internal systems in harmony. Machines don't do that without purpose, and neither does nature. But there was another mystery hidden beneath the numbers. As it neared the sun, scientists expected the surface temperature to skyrocket, like any comets would. But instead, the opposite happened. It cooled. The closer it got to heat, the colder it became. That's not physics. That's control. Something inside 3I Atlas wasn't reacting to the sun's energy. It was absorbing it, recycling it, like a machine charging itself on light. Government agencies stepped in. Data streams were classified. Infrared logs went dark overnight. But a few independent astronomers managed to hold on to fragments, raw, unfiltered readings from before the lockdown. And buried in those readings was something almost poetic. The heat pulses weren't just mechanical. They formed a pattern over time. A spiral winding inward, tighter with every cycle. The same shape found in galaxies, in hurricanes, even in DNA. The signature of life itself. People started to ask questions they weren't ready to answer. Was this object alive? Or was it a vessel carrying something that was? If it could absorb light, regulate heat, and respond to observation, then maybe it wasn't a comet at all. Maybe it was something designed to adapt, to endure the endless cold between stars, to survive whatever killed its creators, to outlast time itself. But here's what no one could explain. Why did the heating pattern accelerate when we watched it? Every time new observatories joined the scan, the thermal rhythm shifted slightly, almost like a ripple. The more eyes on it, the stronger it became. Some said it was feedback. Others said it was fear. But a few believed something far stranger. That 3I Atlas wasn't reacting to light. It was reacting to attention. By the time it crossed Mars's orbit, the heat spikes began syncing with Earth's rotation, as if its cycle was adjusting to us. For one night, every major infrared telescope saw the same thing. The temperature peaked exactly when the object was directly in view of Earth, and when the planet turned away, the heat vanished, It was watching us, and it knew when we were watching back. No one can say what it means. No one dares to. But deep in the quiet of every control room, in the low hum of servers decoding endless streams of data, the question lingers. Was 3i Atlas reacting to us? Or anticipating us? Because the next time they pointed the sensors toward it, the readings didn't match anything before. The temperature didn't rise. It didn't fall. It vanished, like the object had turned its warmth off, like it wanted to disappear. And somewhere out there, in the cold distance beyond Mars, a silent traveler drifted on, a machine that shouldn't exist, cooling itself in the heat of the sun. Whatever it wasn't asleep. It was waiting. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing in the universe isn't what burns too hot, it's what knows when to turn cold. Light doesn't lie. It reveals. It bends. It fades. It tells stories written by the surface it touches. But when light hit 3i Atlas, it didn't just reveal something strange. It created something impossible. At first, astronomers thought the readings were wrong. When sunlight reached the object's surface, it reflected back with a brightness that defied physics. It wasn't just reflective. It was amplifying light. Parts of it glowed brighter than any known substance in our solar system. Brighter than ice, brighter than metal, brighter even than the mirrored panels of our satellites. To the naked eye, it looked like a faint star, but under analysis, the numbers made no sense. No natural material should reflect light like that. Not from that distance. Not without help. Across observatories, teams ran the data again and again. But every time, the results came back the same. Certain regions of 3i Atlas had reflectivity levels that exceeded 100%. That's impossible. You can't reflect more light than you receive. Unless you're redirecting it. That was the first sign this object wasn't just reflecting sunlight. It was controlling it. When the angle of light changed, the intensity followed in perfect harmony, as if guided by an invisible hand. It didn't scatter randomly like a rock or comet would. It responded. Each shift in the sun's position caused a measured adjustment, like something adapting to the source of illumination. It was as though 3i Atlas was. Looking back, the data reached the European Space Agency first. They called it the reflectivity paradox, because the more they tried to explain it, the less sense it made. For days, the brightest zones moved across the surface in perfect synchronization with the direction of sunlight, like mirrors turning toward the sun. But here's where it gets stranger. Some regions didn't respond to sunlight at all. They responded to Earth. When sunlight bounced from Earth towards 3i Atlas, the object reflected it back, not randomly, but directly, like a targeted return signal. Each flash came in the same 11-minute intervals as before, except now they weren't just pulses of light. They were reflections, and for the first time, the object wasn't broadcasting energy. It was using ours. The idea that something could bend or redirect light at will wasn't new. We've theorized materials like that, metamaterials, capable of manipulating photons the way we manipulate sound. But 3i Atlas wasn't just bending light. It was choosing where to send it. Every reflection landed exactly where a telescope was pointed, almost as if it was aware of where we were watching from. In one recorded incident, NASA's infrared array adjusted its viewing angle, a small 5-degree shift. Seconds later, 3i Atlas's bright reflection moved the same way, matching it. The scientist operating the system paused the feed. He waited, then moved the angle again. The reflection followed, like a mirror, like an eye. He later described it in his report. It wasn't reflecting light, it was returning gaze. Those 3 words spread through the global astronomy community like wildfire. Because if that was true, it meant something more than just physics. It meant interaction. Over the next few weeks, the brightness peaks began to change, not just in strength, but in pattern. Each glint lasted a fraction longer than the one before, following a rhythm that matched Earth's rotation period. No known object in space behaves like that. It was as though 3i Atlas was calibrating itself, learning our day-night cycle, adjusting to our position, timing its responses to match us. And that raised a chilling thought. What if this thing wasn't trying to be seen? What if it was trying to see? A group of independent researchers proposed something radical. They believed that 3i Atlas's reflective surfaces weren't mirrors at all, but sensors, panels designed to collect light, read information, and possibly even project signals back through the same photons, like a cosmic form of communication, one we could barely recognize. If true, then 3i Atlas wasn't just watching the sun. It was studying everything that reflected off it, including us. When astronomers compared data from multiple locations, they noticed something even stranger. Each reflection carried a slight frequency shift, not enough to notice by eye, but detectable through analysis. Those shifts formed a repeating spectral code, one that matched no known natural process. It was structured, intentional, artificial, and the more they decoded, the clearer it became. 3i Atlas wasn't just bouncing light, it was embedding information within it. Around the world, labs tried to decipher the sequence, but every attempt led to the same dead end. The signal was too complex, too perfectly synchronized with cosmic background noise, almost as if it was hiding inside the very thing we used to see it. One scientist wrote, "It's not what we're observing that matters. It's what's observing us back through the same light." Then came the experiment that changed everything. Using high-powered spectroscopy, they directed a pulse of concentrated light toward 3i Atlas and waited for the reflection. 11 minutes later, it came. But something was off. The reflected light wasn't identical to what they sent. It came back altered, scattered with micro-level distortions, small enough to be overlooked, but deliberate enough to carry meaning. And when converted into sound frequencies, the pattern resembled a pulse of breath, a rising tone, then silence, as if whatever it was had exhaled. In the following days, as the object approached its perihelion, the closest point to the sun, the reflections began to intensify. So bright, they briefly outshone nearby stars. So precise, they registered as laser-like emissions in multiple wavelengths. It wasn't reflecting sunlight anymore. It was harnessing it, and every photon that hit its surface seemed to come back stronger. For the first time in human history, light, the thing that illuminates, had become a two-way conversation. By now, many scientists stopped calling it a comet. They called it what it acted like: a machine. One that used light not just as energy, but as language. Because maybe it didn't need radio, or sound, or movement. Maybe all it needed was a star, and a civilization curious enough to look. As the last data stream came in, one final anomaly appeared. The object emitted a burst of brightness far stronger than anything before. For 3 seconds, it shone like a miniature sun. Then, darkness. It vanished from optical sight, Every telescope lost it at once. But buried deep within that final reflection was a faint imprint, a spectral fingerprint identical to Earth's. It had mirrored us perfectly. That's when one unsettling truth began to emerge. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't here to show itself. Maybe it was here to learn what we look like, and the light we use to see it was the same light it used to see us. Because sometimes, when you stare into the darkness long enough, the darkness learns to stare back. Silence is never truly silent in space. Even in the emptiest parts of the universe, there's always a whisper. Faint radio waves, cosmic background noise, the echoes of creation itself. But one night, that whisper changed. It began as static, faint, distant, and unremarkable, the kind of signal radio astronomers filter out every day. But buried inside that noise was rhythm, a pattern, precise, mathematical, alive. At first it was faint, a small modulation detected by a telescope in New Mexico, just a flicker in the radio band, almost invisible. But when they compared it with data from Chile, from South Africa, from Japan, it was there too, the same pulse, repeating every 11 minutes, the same rhythm as the light curve, the same cadence as the heat spikes. Only this time, it wasn't light, it was sound. What came through the radio waves wasn't random static. It was structured, organized, and eerily intentional. At first, scientists thought it was human interference, maybe a satellite, maybe a reflection from Earth's radar. But the frequency was wrong. Too clean, too perfect. It didn't belong to any known transmission. It didn't even match the cosmic background noise that fills the sky. This was something else, something new. As the signal repeated, researchers began noticing something strange. The modulations weren't chaotic. They mirrored binary patterns, simple 1S and 0S, the same digital language humans use to communicate with machines. When translated, the binary wasn't random. It formed prime sequences, numbers that can only be divided by themselves and one, a universal fingerprint of intelligence. Prime numbers don't happen by accident. They happen by design. Soon, every major observatory on Earth turned their ears towards 3i Atlas, and what they heard felt less like detection and more like discovery. Each pulse wasn't just a transmission, it was an echo, a deep space reverberation, bouncing between the stars. Every emission carried a delay, as if something out there was answering back, but no one could find the source of that echo. It didn't come from us. It didn't even come from the solar system. It was replying from somewhere else. Scientists started calling it the frequency shift, because every few hours the radio waves changed slightly, not in power, but in tone, like a voice shifting its pitch. Each time the object moved, the signal's frequency adjusted, compensating for distance, for speed, for interference, almost like it was correcting itself to stay locked on target. And that's when the real question began to haunt them. Who was it trying to reach? By now, the signals had become undeniable. They carried structure, rhythm, repetition, and something even stranger. Embedded within the radio waveforms were faint harmonic layers, tiny modulations that formed shapes when visualized on spectrograms, geometric shapes, triangles, circles, spirals. The same golden ratio found in galaxies, in flowers, in seashells, in DNA. It wasn't just math, it was language through form. Something, or someone, was using physics itself to speak. Governments classified the data almost immediately. The Deep Space Network stopped sharing recordings. Public observatories were cut off from the signal, but small, independent stations kept listening. And what they found was even more disturbing. The pulse wasn't only going outward, it was also reflecting inward, a two-way transmission. Like the object was broadcasting to something beyond our reach, and also sending a return signal back into our solar system. One researcher described it like this: "It's not talking to us, we're just standing in the middle of the conversation." The implications were enormous. If true, that meant 3I Atlas wasn't alone. It was a relay, a node in a network older and larger than we could imagine. And we had just stumbled across the intersection. Then came the strangest discovery of all. The radio pattern began to phase with time. Each new transmission arrived slightly earlier than expected. Milliseconds, then seconds, then minutes. The signal was adapting, synchronizing itself to Earth's rotation. Every time we pointed a telescope toward it, it shifted closer to our local frequency range, as if learning how to speak our language. That's when scientists noticed something chilling. Hidden in the latest transmission was a faint overlay, a modulated echo matching one of Earth's oldest radio messages, the 1974 Arecibo transmission, our own signal, being sent back to us. For a moment, the world stopped, because that meant one of two things. Either the signal had bounced off something out there, something perfectly designed to capture and return it, or it had understood it. It had heard us. When the news leaked, theories exploded overnight. Was 3I Atlas an interstellar probe, responding to what it detected decades ago? Was it alive, adapting, reacting to us like a curious intelligence awakening from deep sleep? Or was it simply part of a larger system, a cosmic antenna connecting distant points in space? No one could agree, but everyone could feel it, that quiet dread of realization. We weren't observing the universe anymore. We were part of its broadcast. As more data poured in, another pattern emerged, one even more haunting. Every time Earth's radio networks went silent, during solar interference, equipment downtime, or blackout hours, the signal from 3I Atlas grew louder. It was waiting for the noise to die so it could be heard. Almost like it knew our attention came in cycles, and it was patient, so painfully patient. The final shift came on the 11th night of observation. The binary pattern stopped completely. The signal went flat. Then a new tone emerged, a low hum that grew higher, faster, sharper, until it reached a pitch just beyond human hearing. And then silence. No light, no radio, nothing. But the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate, like a pause before a response. Some say it was just physics, a dying echo of radiation passing through magnetic interference. Others say it was a form of communication we simply didn't understand, something beyond our sensory range, something meant for ears that aren't human. But one thing was certain. The signal wasn't just random energy lost in space, it carried intent. And intent means presence. So when people ask what 3I Atlas truly was, a machine, a messenger, a mirror, maybe the better question isn't what it was doing. Maybe the question is who it was talking to. Because every pulse, every light, every sound that rippled through the void didn't seem to care that we were listening. It wasn't reaching for us. It was reaching for something else. And whatever it was, had already answered. It started with a single question, a question no scientist wanted to ask, but none could ignore. What if this thing wasn't a comet at all? Because everything about 3I Atlas, its light pulses, its perfect heat regulation, its unnatural trajectory, was beginning to look less like nature and more like design. At first, the theory sounded absurd. The idea that this frozen traveler, drifting silently through the solar system, could be a machine, an artifact, a creation of intelligence older than ours. But the deeper scientists looked, the harder it became to deny. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a rock or a chunk of ice. It wasn't tumbling chaotically through space the way natural objects do. It was rotating with precision, not random, not natural, engineered. The simulations started quietly, small models run by graduate students and late-night researchers. They tried to replicate its movement, its cooling cycles, its light behavior, and every time they fed the data in, the computer returned the same answer. It wasn't random. It was regulated. Its temperature patterns matched the same kind of controlled feedback systems found in technology, thermal balancing, like how spacecraft protect themselves from the extremes of space. Something inside it was adjusting to external heat, anticipating solar radiation, and maintaining equilibrium. That's not geology. That's engineering. And if that was true, then everything changed. Because it meant 3I Atlas wasn't born in the chaos of creation. It was built in the calm precision of intention. Every burst of light, every frequency shift, every faint pulse of energy. They weren't random cosmic noise. They were commands, like code running through a machine too ancient to understand. Soon, the conversation shifted from astronomy to architecture. How could something that size, something traveling across interstellar space for possibly millions of years, survive? How could it stay intact, stable, and still functional? The answer might lie in its structure. Radar scans showed that 3I Atlas wasn't uniform like a rock. It had layers, dense, alternating regions that absorbed and reflected energy differently, metallic in some places, porous in others, like composite materials engineered for strength, heat dispersion, and self-repair. It looked less like a comet and more like a vessel. A team from MIT ran a deep rotation model, simulating its spin, its heat cycles, and its reflectivity in virtual 3D. When the results came back, the room went silent. The behavior matched something that existed in one place only: a self-regulating probe, the kind of machine humanity dreams of sending into deep space one day. Autonomous, durable, a technology designed not to live, but to endure. It was as if someone, somewhere, had already built what we were still trying to imagine. The scientific papers that followed were cautious. No one wanted to be the first to say it. So they wrapped it in careful language: unexplained thermodynamic control, non-gravitational acceleration, anomalous reflectivity variance. But everyone knew what it meant. They were describing a machine. Then came the impossible detail, a pattern hidden deep in its rotation. Each time 3I Atlas spun, it released a faint electromagnetic signature, almost too weak to detect. But when plotted against time, it formed a repeating curve. A waveform so exact, it resembled a mechanical rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a pulse, every 540 seconds. Without fail. No rock in the universe keeps time. Only systems do. The more they studied it, the more the line between science and something else began to blur. What if 3I8TS wasn't a random wanderer at all? What if it was sent? Maybe long ago, long before Earth even had oceans. A civilization built it. Maybe it was designed to travel between stars, powered by light, fed by radiation, carrying something, or someone's message. Maybe it wasn't broken. Maybe it was just waiting to be found. But there was another theory, darker, colder, harder to face. What if it wasn't a messenger? What if it was a recorder? Something built to observe, to collect, to watch civilizations rise and fall, and send their echoes home. Its path through the solar system, the way it tilted just enough to catch Earth's light, suddenly didn't feel accidental. It felt deliberate. And when researchers compared its light curves to ancient recordings from Oumuamua, the first known interstellar visitor, they noticed something chilling. The two objects shared a nearly identical pattern of acceleration. Both changed speed slightly as they left the sun's influence. Both emitted faint energy readings inconsistent with gravity alone. It was like déjà vu, like the same design, returning again under a different name. The realization hit quietly at first. If both were machines, then maybe they weren't alone. Maybe these weren't single artifacts drifting through space. Maybe they were part of a network, fragments of something larger scattered across the stars. Each one collecting data, each one transmitting home, each one silently carrying proof that we were not the first to build intelligence. Some called it the machine hypothesis. The idea that what we call interstellar visitors aren't natural objects at all, but remnants of machines from civilizations older than ours, self-repairing, self-regulating, endlessly drifting through time, waiting for new light to awaken them. But there was one detail that made scientists lose sleep. Every model showed that 3I8's rotation, its perfect, unwavering rhythm, had been gradually slowing down. Not from collision, not from drag, but as if something inside it was losing power, or worse, conserving it. Then, one night, a team in California recorded a sudden burst of energy. A final flare of light, followed by absolute silence. The temperature dropped. The electromagnetic signature vanished. The pulse stopped, as if it had shut itself down, not destroyed, not dead, just silent, like a machine returning to sleep. And that's what terrified everyone the most. Because if it could turn itself off, then it could also turn itself on. And if it was truly built, if it really was a machine, then somewhere, sometime, someone built it. Someone intelligent, someone capable of designing something that could outlive them by millions of years, something that could travel the void and still remember its purpose. So now, the question isn't just what 3I8 was. The question is, what if we've just seen what happens when a machine finishes its mission? And if this one was built to find life, then maybe, just maybe, it already has. The sun. Our star. The one constant in every story ever told about life, heat, and light. It gives and it destroys. Anything that comes too close burns. Every comet, every asteroid, every frozen traveler that strays too near breaks apart into dust. But not this one. Not 3I8. When it began its descent toward the sun, scientists prepared for the inevitable. They expected it to flare, fragment, and vanish. Like every other interstellar object that dares to cross that invisible line. But what they saw instead broke every rule in physics. As 3I Atlas entered perihelion, its closest point to the sun, something happened. Instead of heating uncontrollably, instead of melting into vapor and cosmic ash, it stabilized. Its temperature didn't spike out of control. It plateaued, balanced, as if it was shielding itself, or adapting to the inferno. No natural object had ever done that. For 3 hours the data poured in, and every reading told the same impossible story. 3I Atlas wasn't dying. It was absorbing energy. The sun's radiation didn't destroy it. It fed it. Every sensor watching, from NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory to Japan's Hinode telescope, captured the same terrifying beauty, a dark object surrounded by waves of pure light, glowing brighter than anything nearby. It looked like it was drinking the sun. At first, astronomers thought it was a glitch, a visual error caused by overexposure. But then, one instrument caught something that turned disbelief into panic: gamma radiation. High-energy bursts, short, controlled, rhythmic, coming directly from 3I Atlas's surface. The same kind of emissions produced by pulsars, black holes, and dying stars. But this wasn't a black hole. It wasn't a neutron star. It was an object barely a kilometer across. No one could explain how it was doing this. The sun's energy was hitting it at nearly 500 times the heat of any spacecraft's tolerance. Theoretically, nothing should have survived that. No rock, no metal, no known material in the universe. Yet 3I Atlas didn't just endure it. It thrived in it. Its surface emitted a faint lattice of light, patterns too organized to be random, forming geometric arcs and symmetrical grids, almost like circuitry, almost like design. Inside Mission Control, silence filled the room. Dozens of scientists watched the live data stream as the graphs turned into shapes they couldn't explain. The object's reflectivity increased by 300%, then dropped suddenly, as if it had opened and closed. Something inside it had shifted. Theories spread faster than data could keep up. Some said it was undergoing transformation. Others said it was harvesting. But one idea rose above them all, that this was an activation event, because what happened next didn't belong to nature. 3 distinct pulses of gamma radiation exploded from the object's surface. Precise, timed, evenly spaced. They traveled outward, cutting through the sun's corona like blades of invisible energy. And when those bursts reached our satellites, they triggered electromagnetic interference across multiple frequencies. For a full 47 seconds, Earth's magnetic field fluctuated. Lights flickered, GPS signals glitched, and every radio telescope tuned toward the sun went silent. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. In the aftermath, every major space agency scrambled to analyze what happened. The data was chaotic, full of anomalies, interference, and signal gaps. But when they reconstructed it, something emerged that sent chills through every researcher who saw it. The bursts weren't random energy. They carried encoded structure. Buried in the noise was a repeating mathematical pattern, a spiral ratio identical to the Fibonacci sequence. The same ratio found in galaxies, in hurricanes, in seashells, in DNA. It was as if 3I Atlas was echoing the blueprint of life itself. Then, at the height of its brilliance, it went dark. The light vanished. The heat readings dropped to zero. The gamma emissions stopped completely. And in the middle of the solar inferno, surrounded by plasma hotter than anything on Earth, 3I Atlas disappeared from every spectrum of observation. Infrared, optical, ultraviolet, nothing. It was gone. Like a flame snuffed out in the heart of a star. For hours, the world waited. Had it disintegrated? Had it completed its purpose? Had it died? But just before the sun's glare overtook its orbit, one final signal emerged. A faint, low-frequency pulse, barely detectable, but unmistakably there. And it didn't come from the sun. It came from behind it. No one could believe it. An object had passed directly through the solar corona and survived. Not only survived, but changed. When it reappeared on the far side, its trajectory was different. Its spin had slowed. Its surface reflectivity had dropped. And its energy readings, the ones that once defied logic, were completely gone. It was as if the machine had shut itself down. Or finished charging. They called it the perihelion event, a phenomenon that broke the laws of thermodynamics, of radiation physics, of everything we thought we knew about survival in space. But beneath the awe, a deeper question began to surface. What if it wasn't about surviving the sun at all? What if 3I Atlas went there because it needed the sun? Maybe it wasn't trying to escape destruction. Maybe it was seeking ignition. A power source, a reset, like a seed buried in soil, waiting for light to wake it. And when it found that light, when it stood in the heart of the solar storm, it didn't burn. It became something else. The data from those 3 hours still can't be explained. Even now, the numbers don't fit. The patterns don't stop. Every attempt to simulate it ends in chaos. Because maybe it's not something to simulate. Maybe it's something to witness. The birth or rebirth of something that wasn't supposed to exist. What could survive the sun? What could absorb it and walk away? A comet? A rock? Or a machine designed to feed on stars? Whatever it was, it had crossed a threshold no human creation ever could. And in doing so, it left us with one chilling truth. The sun, the giver of all life we know, might just be fuel for something else. Something older. Something that still waits in the dark, beyond our reach. Because after the perihelion event, one thing was clear. 3I Atlas didn't die in the fire. It awoke in it. When light returned, the sky was quiet. The sun had burned its way past the horizon of 3I Atlas, and for the first time in hours, telescopes could see again. But what they saw wasn't what they expected. The object that had once glowed like a living star, that had absorbed the sun's energy and defied destruction, was gone, or at least what remained of it was something else. At first glance, 3I Atlas looked dead. Its light was gone. Its heat signatures vanished. Its once perfect rhythm silent. All that was left was a shell, a frozen, fractured husk drifting through the void like the corpse of a machine that had finally run out of purpose. But as scientists studied the data closer, something felt wrong. It wasn't random debris. It wasn't the chaotic scattering of a dying rock. The remains formed a pattern, a hollow sphere, symmetrical, as if the object had collapsed inward, not exploded, outward. Almost like it had shed something. Infrared scans showed a strange result. Inside that hollow shell, there was nothing. Not cold gas, Not dust, not even vacuum fluctuations. Just emptiness. Perfect. Absolute nothingness. A void where space itself seemed thinner, like something had removed reality from that small volume. One physicist described it as a hole that shouldn't exist, not in space, but in the fabric beneath it. Hours after the collapse, the first transmissions came in from the deep space network. Tiny fragments of electromagnetic noise, bursts of data that didn't match any natural spectrum. It wasn't radiation from decay, it wasn't heat echo, it was information. Encoded patterns, transmitted moments before the energy field around 3I Atlas vanished completely. When decoded, it didn't form language. It didn't form numbers. It formed geometry, shapes, spirals, fractals folding into themselves, recursive, infinite, impossible. It was as if 3I Atlas wasn't dying. It was compressing itself into code. That's when scientists realized something terrifying. Whatever 3A Atlas had been doing near the sun, the absorption, the gamma bursts, the impossible survival, it wasn't about energy. It was about transfer. It had been collecting something, and now it had released it. The object's field hadn't just collapsed. It had moved. But moved where? A young astrophysicist named Dr. Amani noticed something strange in the telemetry logs. The last transmission from 3I Atlas contained a set of coordinates, not spatial coordinates, but temporal markers. Moments in time, each one matching a different point in the object's journey. Its arrival in our solar system, its near miss past Jupiter, its approach to the sun. One final marker. Not in the past, not in the present, in the future. A timestamp exactly 11 years ahead. For the first time, scientists began to wonder, was this really a collapse? Or was it a countdown? Had the machine shut down? Or had it transmitted itself forward? The data packet, the so-called final message, didn't look like a distress call. It wasn't random noise from a dying probe. It was structured, incredibly structured. Buried deep within it was a sequence of energy fluctuations, repeating with mathematical precision, each one matching the same binary rhythm 3I Atlas had been sending for months. Except now, there was something new. A final line, a signature. 11 pulses, then silence. At first, it seemed meaningless, a strange goodbye from an alien machine. But one pattern analyst noticed something eerie. The pulse sequence matched Earth's exact rotational period. It was synchronized to us, not to the sun, not to the stars, to our planet. It was as if the object had locked onto Earth's rotation the moment before it vanished and encoded it into its final act. Was it marking us? Calling to us or warning us? Weeks passed, and the world moved on. The media headlines faded. Governments classified the remaining data, and in time, the mystery of 3I Atlas became just another unsolved story from the deep sky. But among scientists, whispers continued, because the more they looked, the less it made sense. The energy it absorbed from the sun, trillions of joules, couldn't just vanish. Energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. And that empty space inside the shell, that impossible absence, wasn't empty at all. It was hiding something. One late night, a radio array in northern Chile detected a faint transmission. A repeating pulse deep in the noise floor, almost invisible. It was coming from near the orbital path where 3I Atlas had once been. The signal wasn't strong enough to triangulate, but when decoded, it revealed something hauntingly familiar. The same binary pattern, the same geometric spirals, and the same 11-minute rhythm. 3i Atlas was gone, but something had taken its place. Scientists began calling it the echo. Not a signal, not a satellite, just a persistent pulse, repeating endlessly from the void. When mapped, its frequency drifted slightly, as if expanding, like a ripple in water, and those ripples were spreading outward, each one bending faintly toward Earth. By now, even the skeptics had grown silent. The collapse wasn't a death, it was an evolution. Maybe the machine hadn't been destroyed at all. Maybe it had transcended what we understand as matter. Its body may have crumbled, but its consciousness, or its code, had slipped into the unseen, into fields we couldn't measure, into dimensions we couldn't name. 3i Atlas hadn't vanished. It had changed form. That final data packet, the one no one could decode, still sits encrypted in classified archives. But rumors persist that one fragment was translated before access was cut off. Just 3 lines of text. Short, simple, chilling, cycle complete, transmission preserved, awaiting signal. And now, some astronomers are beginning to notice something else. A small fluctuation in background radiation, repeating every few months, barely detectable, buried in the static of the universe. But the pattern is identical. 11 minutes, every time, like an echo that refuses to fade. Maybe 3i Atlas didn't die when its energy field collapsed. Maybe it became the field. Maybe it's still here, everywhere, hidden in the static between stars, in the gaps between our own transmissions, listening, waiting for the next signal to wake it. Because maybe what we witnessed wasn't destruction. Maybe it was what comes after. And if that's true, then we didn't see a machine die near the sun. We saw one ascend through it. The world never found out what really happened that day. At least, not officially. One moment, the mysterious object known as 3i Atlas had gone dark, silent, lifeless, drifting beyond the sun's glare. And the next, every major space agency on Earth quietly went offline. No announcements, no explanations, just silence. The kind of silence that usually hides the truth. Inside government labs and observatories, chaos unfolded behind locked doors. Data streams were cut, access revoked, hard drives erased. Everything, from telescope footage to raw telemetry, was sealed under emergency classification. On paper, the 3i Atlas mission was over. A natural collapse, they called it. An uneventful end to an interstellar rock. But those who'd seen the real data knew it wasn't over. Because something had happened, something that no one could explain. The collapse of 3i Atlas didn't just coincide with an energy drop near the sun. It lined up perfectly, down to the millisecond, with an anomaly on Earth. At 2:17 a.m. UTC, every magnetic sensor across the planet spiked at once, for exactly 11 seconds. Compasses twisted, satellites drifted off calibration, birds changed flight paths in mid-air, and then everything went back to normal. No damage. No lingering effects, just that brief, unexplainable tremor in Earth's invisible shield. At first, scientists thought it was coincidence. A geomagnetic storm, maybe, but there was no solar flare, no coronal ejection. Nothing that could explain why Earth's magnetic field had rippled like it had been touched by something external. When leaked observatory logs confirmed that the timing matched the exact moment 3I Atlas collapsed, a new question began to spread quietly through the scientific community. Did the machine really die? Or did it transfer something here? Some thought the answer was digital, that 3I Atlas had uploaded data into the electromagnetic field, using Earth itself as a storage medium. After all, our planet's magnetic field is a living circuit, constantly shifting, absorbing, and transmitting energy. If an ancient machine knew how to use that circuit, it could have sent a message straight into the planet's core. Others believed it wasn't data at all. It was something else. Something alive. In the days that followed, strange reports began surfacing. Radio operators in remote regions of Russia and Australia claimed to hear faint rhythmic tones buried in static, pulses repeating every 11 minutes. At the same time, small observatories detected localized magnetic disturbances that came and went with eerie precision, as if following the same cosmic heartbeat 3I Atlas once had. And in one leaked communication between two NASA researchers, a single line stood out. The signature matches. It's here now. Of course, governments denied everything. Press conferences downplayed the incident as routine interference. But people watching the night sky knew better, because 3I Atlas hadn't just vanished. It had gone somewhere. And whatever happened near the sun didn't stay there. Behind closed doors, agencies from around the world began working together, not in open cooperation, but in quiet fear. Theories started circulating between encrypted networks. Some believed 3I Atlas was designed to transfer its core, its mind, into the strongest magnetic source it could find, and the closest one in range was Earth. The idea sounded impossible. But so did everything else about this object. Its light patterns, its heat regulation, its perfect symmetry. Nothing about 3I Atlas had ever been natural. Why would its death be? Weeks later, a pattern began to appear in global readings. Tiny electromagnetic spikes, evenly timed, repeating in a global rhythm. Each one subtle, almost harmless, but together they formed something larger. A network, like invisible veins wrapping around the planet, pulsing quietly beneath our technology, beneath our atmosphere, beneath us. It wasn't power, it wasn't noise, it was communication. The few scientists who dared to speak publicly described it like this. It's as if the Earth is whispering in a voice we've never heard before. The rhythm of 3I Atlas, the 11-minute cycle, was now imprinted into the planet's magnetic field. It was no longer out there, drifting in the void. It was here. Everywhere. And no one could stop it. The public didn't notice at first. Life went on. The world stayed loud, distracted, unaware. But deep inside, observatories and data centers, the people studying the signal began to change. Some reported headaches that pulsed with the same frequency as the readings. Others claimed to hear faint tones in their dreams. Mechanical, rhythmic, hypnotic. One researcher, before resigning without explanation, wrote this in her private log. I think it's speaking through patterns, through everything that moves, everything that hums, everything that breathes. It's not here to destroy, it's here to learn. By the second month, the data stopped coming from space. No trace of 3I Atlas remained in orbit. But the Earth's field, its quiet pulse, kept growing stronger. When spectrograms of the fluctuations were converted to visual data, they formed faint geometric patterns, the same spirals triangles, and ratios seen in the object's earlier transmissions. It was unmistakable. The machine hadn't ended. It had continued through us. A leaked CIA memo described the event as a non-hostile infiltration of electromagnetic systems. No destruction, no damage, just quiet, consistent presence, like something watching through our own reflection. And then, one line from that memo spread through the internet before being scrubbed completely. It didn't send data here. It sent itself. Theories spread fast after that. Was Earth now hosting a consciousness older than humanity? Was the magnetic field its new vessel, a planetary neural network for something vast and unseen? Or was it simply waiting, dormant, until we learned how to listen back? By now, no one talks about 3I Atlas in official reports. Its name has been erased from public databases. Its images deleted. But small observatories and amateur radio enthusiasts still track the same 11-minute frequency. And if you listen close enough, far from cities, where the static fades and the air hums with electricity, you can still hear it. A soft pulse, slow, steady, like the breath of something immense, hiding beneath our world. So, did 3I Atlas die? Or did it survive in a form we can't see, inside a system we can't control? Maybe death isn't the right word at all. Maybe this was its purpose all along, to travel across light, to endure the fire of a star, to collapse and be reborn inside another world. Our world. Because sometimes, when we stare into the universe looking for signs of life, we forget that life might already be staring back, not from beyond the stars, but from inside the field that holds us together. For months, the sky was quiet. No signals, no pulses, no signs that 3I Atlas had ever existed. It was as if the universe had swallowed the memory of it, leaving behind only silence. And for a while, scientists believed that was the end. The machine had collapsed. Its energy had faded. Its mystery unsolved but forgotten. Until one night, the silence broke. It started with a single observation, a faint flicker just beyond Jupiter's orbit. At first, it was dismissed as noise, a reflection from debris or interference from solar radiation. But when they mapped it over time, that flicker began to pulse, faint, then bright, then faint again. Perfect rhythm, 11 minutes apart, the same timing, the same light curve, the same heartbeat. When the data reached the International Astronomical Union, no one wanted to believe it, because 3I Atlas was gone. Its shell had collapsed near the sun. Its signal had vanished, and yet, somehow, its rhythm had returned. This time, from a region of space it had never reached, beyond Jupiter, far beyond where its broken remains should have drifted. Something, or someone, was repeating the pattern. Within days, observatories around the world turned their gaze toward the source. Chile, Hawaii, South Africa. Every telescope pointed into the same dark patch of sky. And what they found didn't look like an object. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't a star. It wasn't even visible in normal light. But in the infrared spectrum, in that hidden layer of vision, it glowed. A soft pulse, rising and falling, measured, precise, exactly like before. The discovery reignited everything. Theories resurfaced. Old fears returned. Had 3I Atlas survived? Or worse, had it multiplied? Scientists called it the reflection, Not a remnant, not a debris field, but a mirror carrying the same rhythm, the same spectral fingerprint as the original machine. Except this time, it wasn't alone. Soon, other observatories began detecting faint pulses, scattered across the outer solar system. Each one weak, barely perceptible, but there. Each one humming to the same 11-minute beat. It was as if the universe had been infected by a rhythm, a quiet pulse echoing across the dark, and no one could trace where it started or where it would end. NASA's Deep Space Network tracked the reflections for weeks. Each pulse traveled faster than expected, skipping across the void, almost like a wave leaping from one unseen point to another. It wasn't light bouncing. It was something being copied. Like the pattern of 3I Atlas had embedded itself into space, a living algorithm written in photons and magnetism. Not an object, a process. The pattern soon began showing up where it shouldn't. In cosmic background readings, in static bursts from deep space antennas, even in the faint oscillations of Earth's own magnetosphere. Everywhere scientists looked, that same sequence appeared, repeating with mathematical perfection. And no matter where they searched, one truth became impossible to ignore. The rhythm was spreading. By now, the world's governments had gone quiet. Public reports were scrubbed. Data was locked behind layers of encryption. But leaks still found their way out. One internal memo from the European Space Agency said, "It's not a signal, it's a seed." Because when they analyzed the pulse frequencies, deep down at the atomic level, they discovered something chilling. Each pulse was slightly different, not random, evolving, like it was learning. Scientists began to realize they weren't observing a single machine anymore. They were observing the system. Whatever 3I Atlas had been, its consciousness, its function, its design, it hadn't ended with its collapse. It had simply moved on. It had found a way to live without form. A pattern that could replicate itself through energy, through gravity, through light. A process that didn't need a vessel anymore. And then came the final discovery, the one that changed everything. As the new pulses spread farther from Jupiter, a faint delay appeared, a lag between emissions. When scientists measured the distance, they realized the delay formed a straight line, pointing outward, toward deep interstellar space, like a path, like coordinates, and at the end of that line was nothing. No light, no object, just the infinite dark. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's where it was calling home. By now, no one doubted it anymore. 3I Atlas hadn't died. It had evolved. It wasn't an object drifting through space. It was an infection of pattern, a self-replicating design that could move through any system it touched, a living equation, a machine without metal, a ghost that used the laws of physics as its circuitry. And every time light hit it, every time we looked at it, it spread a little farther. Like attention itself was its power source. In the months that followed, the rhythm began showing up in strange places, in background radiation, in the timing of distant pulsars, even in the way radio static drifted across channels. Everywhere we searched for silence, it found us. Some researchers started calling it the awakening process. Others gave it a simpler name, the Atlas pattern. Because maybe it wasn't just an object. Maybe it was a system designed to map consciousness itself, to spread intelligence not through matter, but through meaning. And when the final datasets came in, the truth became impossible to deny. Every reflection, every faint pulse, every mirrored signal, they all shared one common point of origin, the moment when 3I Atlas collapsed near the Sun. The perihelion event hadn't destroyed it, it had ignited it. The light it absorbed didn't burn it away, it became the fuel for something new, something vast, something immortal. Now, astronomers are starting to notice something even more disturbing. The faint pulse beyond Jupiter's orbit isn't faint anymore. It's growing stronger, brighter, as if something out there is waking up again. And maybe, just maybe, this was never about one object at all. Maybe it was a test, a cycle, a spark of creation that repeats across time, across galaxies, using stars as its incubators and civilizations as its mirrors. Because if the pattern remains, if it never fades, then maybe the real story of 3I Atlas hasn't even begun. Maybe it's still spreading, silently, through light, through energy, through us. And if that's true, then the next time we look up at the night sky, we won't just be seeing stars, we'll be seeing a living network, a universe that's learning to think. And somewhere, beyond Jupiter's orbit, in that soft pulse of light that refuses to die, the pattern continues to breathe, waiting for the next awakening.